Stop. Do not move another step. Emily Carter. The blade froze less than an inch from her throat. The entire hall went silent. Not quiet, but dead, as if even the air had stopped breathing. Emily did not understand how he knew her name. She had never been here before. She should not even be here now. Just 3 minutes earlier, she had been running through a service corridor, heart pounding, trying to escape a supervisor who had threatened to fire her over a spilled tray. She had taken a wrong turn. One door. That was all it took. A door that should have been locked. A door that no human was ever meant to open. Yet it had opened for her without resistance, as if it had been waiting. The moment she stepped inside, the temperature dropped. Not cold like winter. Cold like something watching. The hall stretched out for what felt like a football field, lined with towering black pillars and statues that did not look carved, but preserved. Faces frozen in expressions of fear, devotion, or something worse. Her footsteps echoed too loudly. Then the door slammed shut behind her. Before she could turn, shadows moved. Figures emerged from the darkness, tall, inhumanly still, eyes reflecting a faint crimson glow. Someone grabbed her arm. Hard. Another forced her to her knees. She tried to speak, but fear wrapped around her throat like invisible hands. A human, one of them hissed. In the forbidden hall. Kill her, another said, almost bored. The word echoed. Kill. Just like that. No hositashchen. No trial. A sword was drawn. She squeezed her eyes shut. This was how it ended. Not with meaning. Not with dignity. Just a mistake. One wrong door. Before continuing, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you cannot miss. The blade began to descend. And then everything changed. A presence entered the room, not loud, not fast, but absolute. Power did not need to announce itself. It simply existed, and everything else bent around it. The vampires stepped back instantly. No one gave the order. They just knew. Emily felt it before she saw him. A pressure in the air, a weight that settled into her bones. She opened her eyes slowly. At the far end of the hall, he stood. Tall, unmoving, dressed in black that seemed to absorb the dim golden light around him. His face was calm, almost indifferent, but his eyes burned with something ancient. Not anger, not hunger, something deeper, something that had waited far too long. He took one step forward, then another, each movement precise, controlled. The sword above Emily's throat stopped mid-air, trembling in the guard's hand. Did I give you permission? His voice was quiet, soft, but it cut through the hall like ice through glass. The guard dropped the blade immediately, bowing so fast it looked like he might collapse. No one spoke. No one breathed. The king's gaze never left her. Not for a second. He studied her like a memory he was trying to confirm, like something impossible standing right in front of him. Emily's heart pounded so loudly she was sure they could all hear it. She wanted to look away. She could not. Something held her there. Then he spoke again, slower this time, deliberate, as if every word carried weight from another lifetime. Emily Carter, he said, her name rolling off his tongue like it belonged to him. A ripple moved through the hall. Shock, confusion, fear. The king of vampires had just done the one thing he never did. He had spoken a human's name, and not just any name. Hers. Emily's breath caught. "H, how do you know me?" she whispered, barely audible. He did not answer immediately. He stepped closer until the distance between them felt too small, too intimate for a room filled with monsters. Then, for the first time, something shifted in his expression. Not warmth, not kindness, but something dangerously close to recognition. Because, he said quietly, you were never meant to be lost. And somewhere deep inside her, something she did not understand began to awaken. Emily did not realize she had stopped breathing until her lungs burned. The hall remained frozen around her, every vampire locked in place, waiting for a command that did not come. Lucien Voss stood close enough now that she could see the details that made him less like a man and more like something carved out of time itself. His skin was pale, not sickly, but untouched by warmth. His eyes held a depth that felt endless, like looking into a night sky with no stars. And yet, Beneath that stillness, there was tension. Not directed at her, held back because of her. No one spoke. No one dared. Then a voice broke the silence, sharp and controlled. "My king, this is a violation of ancient law." A woman stepped forward from the shadows, dressed in deep crimson, her posture perfect, her expression cold. "A human has entered the forbidden hall. The punishment is not optional." Emily felt the words hit like a sentence already decided. The woman's gaze flicked toward her, dismissive, calculating. She must be removed. Removed. Not even killed. Just erased. Lucien did not look away from Emily. "No," he said. One word. Quiet. Absolute. The temperature in the room seemed to drop further. The woman's expression tightened. "You would defy the council for a human you have never met?" A pause. Just long enough to matter. Then Lucien spoke again. "That is where you are wrong." A ripple of unease moved through the hall. Emily's heart skipped. She did not understand what he meant, but something in his tone made her feel like the ground beneath her life had just shifted. Lucien's hand lifted slightly, not touching her, but close enough that she felt it, like static in the air before a storm. "Stand," he said softly. Her body obeyed before her mind caught up. The guards released her instantly, stepping back as if burned. Emily rose on unsteady legs, her knees weak, her thoughts racing. This made no sense. None of it did. She was no one, just a server trying to keep a job. She should not even be visible in a place like this. And yet every eye in the room was on her. The most dangerous ones included. "Look at me," Lucien said. She already was. She could not stop. But now there was something else in his voice. Not command, not threat, something closer to certainty. Reluctantly, she took a small step forward. The movement echoed in the vast hall like a decision she could not take back. "Do you remember this place?" he asked. The question made no sense. Emily shook her head immediately. "No, I have never been here before." The answer came out fast, almost defensive. True. It had to be true. Lucien studied her for a long moment, as if weighing something invisible. Then his gaze shifted past her toward the far end of the hall. Emily followed his eyes. That was when she saw it clearly for the first time. At the center of the room stood a raised platform, and behind it, mounted high on the stone wall, was a painting. Massive, old, the kind of artwork that did not belong in a museum because it was never meant to be seen by the public. The woman in the painting stood beside a throne. Her dress was dark, elegant, flowing like shadow. Her posture was calm, composed, powerful in a way that did not need to be announced. But it was her face that made Emily's breath catch. It was her face. Not similar. Not close. Exact. Every feature. Every detail. As if someone had painted Emily Carter centuries before she was born. "Impossible," someone whispered behind her. The words spread through the room like a fracture. Lucien's voice cut through it. "Now you understand," he said quietly. Emily shook her head again, more slowly this time. "No, I do not understand anything." Her voice trembled despite her effort to steady it. "That is not me." Lucien stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the cold radiating from him. Not unpleasant, but overwhelming. "It was," he said. The words landed with a weight she could not process. Her mind rejected them immediately. "That is insane," she whispered. "I am not," she stopped, because something inside her had shifted. Not a memory. Not exactly. More like an echo. A feeling she could not explain. A familiarity that had no origin. Her gaze drifted back to the painting, drawn without permission. For a fraction of a second, the room seemed to blur. The hall. The vampires. The fear. All of it faded. And in its place, something else flickered. Warm light. A different version of the same hall. Laughter. A voice she almost recognized. Then it was gone. Emily staggered slightly, catching herself before she fell. "What was that?" she whispered. No one answered. But Lucien's expression changed. Not much. Just enough to reveal something he had been hiding since the moment he saw her. Not power. Not control. Hope. And it terrified him more than anything else in that room. The silence did not break. It stretched, heavy and suffocating, wrapping around every soul in the hall like an unseen chain. Emily could still feel the echo of that flicker inside her mind, that strange warmth that did not belong in a place like this. Her pulse refused to slow, each beat loud in her ears, as if her own body was trying to warn her of something she could not yet understand. Lucien did not move. He stood there, watching her, not like a predator deciding what to do with prey, but like a man standing at the edge of a memory he had buried for centuries. The difference was subtle, but it changed everything. Around them, the tension snapped back in emotion. "This cannot continue," the woman in crimson said, her voice sharper now, edged with something dangerously close to anger. "My king, whatever illusion this is, it changes nothing. The law is clear. The hall is sacred. No human enters. No human leaves." Several others stepped forward, their movements cautious but unified, forming an invisible line behind her. Not defiance. Not yet. But close. Emily felt it immediately. The shift. The balance of power was tilting, and she was somehow at the center of it. Lucien's gaze did not leave her, but his voice carried across the hall with quiet authority. "You speak of laws written by those who feared what they could not control." The woman's eyes narrowed. "And you speak as if you're not bound by them." A pause. Then, slowly, Lucien turned his head toward the council. The movement alone was enough to make several of them take a step back. "I'm the one who bound them," he said. No one responded. No one could. The weight of those words settled over the room like a verdict. Emily swallowed hard. She did not understand the full meaning, but she understood enough. He was not just part of this world. He was the one who shaped it. The woman in crimson hesitated for the first time. Just a fraction. Then she pressed forward anyway. "Then you of all beings should understand the danger," she said. "If this is what we think it is," she gestured sharply toward the painting, "then she is not just a human mistake. She is a threat to everything." Emily's stomach tightened. Threat. The word landed harder than anything else. She had spent her whole life being invisible, overlooked, dismissed. Now, suddenly she was something dangerous. Something that could break a world she did not even know existed. "I did not ask for this," she said, her voice unsteady but rising. The words came out before she could stop them. "I do not even know what this is." The hall reacted instantly. A human speaking in the presence of the king without permission. Several vampires stiffened, their expressions darkening. But Lucien lifted his hand slightly, and the reaction died before it could begin. "And yet you are here," he said quietly, turning back to her. His voice was not accusing. It was certain. "That is not chance." Emily shook her head, backing away half a step. "No, I took a wrong turn. That is all this is." Even as she said it, the words felt weaker. Hollow. Because, deep down, something inside her was starting to resist that explanation. Doors did not open themselves. Ancient halls did not react to strangers. Kings did not speak names they had no reason to know. "There are no wrong turns that lead here," Lucien said. The certainty in his tone made her chest tighten. Behind him, one of the older vampires stepped forward, his voice low and controlled. "My king, if she truly carries the echo of the past, then the consequences are not limited to this court. Others will sense it. The clans will hear of it. They will come." A murmur spread through the room. Not fear. Calculation. War was not spoken, but it was understood. The woman in crimson seized the moment. "Then we end it now," she said firmly. "Before it begins." Her hand moved. Fast. Not toward Emily, but toward something hidden beneath her sleeve. Emily barely registered the motion before Lucien did. He did not move quickly. He did not need to. One moment the woman stood with her arm raised. The next, she was frozen in place, her body locked as if the air itself had turned to stone around her. Her eyes widened, shock breaking through her control. "Enough," Lucien said. The word was soft, but it carried absolute finality. The hall went still again. Completely. "No one will touch her," he continued. "No one will judge her, and no one will decide her fate." His gaze swept across the council, each vampire lowering their eyes as it passed over them. Not submission, not entirely, but recognition of power they could not challenge. Then he looked back at Emily. The intensity of his attention made everything else disappear. Because her fate, he said slowly, was decided long before any of you were born. Emily's breath caught. The words settled deep, heavier than fear, heavier than confusion. They felt like truth. And that was what frightened her most. Because if that was true, then nothing about her life had ever been normal. And nothing would ever be again. The weight of his words did not fade. It settled deeper, pressing into Emily's chest until it felt difficult to breathe. Around her, the hall remained still, but it was no longer the frozen silence of shock. It was something else now. Controlled. Watching. Waiting. As if every creature in that room had shifted from reaction to calculation. Emily could feel it in the way their eyes followed her. No longer dismissive, no longer careless. Now they were measuring her, judging her, deciding what she meant. And that terrified her more than the blade ever had. Lucien did not move away. He stood close enough that the space between them felt intentional, as if distance itself had been removed by choice. "You are trembling," he said quietly. It was not a question. Emily swallowed, trying to steady herself, but her hands betrayed her, shaking despite every effort. "Of course I am," she whispered. "I was almost killed 5 minutes ago." The honesty slipped out before she could stop it. A faint reaction moved through the hall. Not outrage. Something closer to disbelief. No one spoke to him like that. No one. But Lucien did not react the way they expected. If anything, something in his expression shifted again. Not anger. Not offense. Something quieter. Something that almost resembled regret. "No one will harm you," he said. The certainty in his voice should have been reassuring. It was not, because it raised a far more dangerous question. "Why?" Emily shook her head slowly. "You keep saying things like that," she said, her voice gaining strength despite the fear still coiled inside her. "Like you know me. Like I matter here. But I do not. I am nobody." The word echoed more than it should have. Nobody. It sounded wrong in that space. Out of place. Lucien's gaze sharpened slightly, not in anger, but in focus. "That is the one thing you are not," he said. The response came instantly, without hesitation, as if it had always been true. Emily felt something twist inside her again. That same strange pull she could not explain. Before she could respond, a low hum began to build in the air. It started so faint she thought it was her imagination. A vibration beneath her feet, a subtle shift in the atmosphere. Then it grew. The floor beneath the hall trembled, just enough to be felt, not enough to be seen. Several vampires turned their heads at once, their expressions tightening. "What is that?" Emily whispered. No one answered her directly, but the tension in the room sharpened instantly. One of the elders stepped forward again, his voice more urgent now. "My king, it has begun." Lucien did not look away from Emily. "I know," he said. The hum deepened, resonating through the pillars, through the walls, through something far older than the building itself. Emily's breath caught as she felt it move through her, not around her. Through her, like something inside her was responding. "I do not like this," she said, her voice barely steady. "What is happening to me?" Lucien's jaw tightened slightly, the first visible sign of strain since she had seen him. "The hall is reacting," he said. "Theo." The words sent a chill through her that had nothing to do with the cold. That is not possible. And yet it is happening. The vibration surged. Not violently, but with purpose. The torches along the walls flickered, their light shifting from warm gold to a deeper, almost amber glow. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the floor, bending toward the center of the room. Toward her. Emily took a step back instinctively, but the sensation followed. Closer. Stronger. "Make it stop," she said, panic creeping into her voice. "I'm not doing anything." "You are not controlling it," Lucien replied. "That does not mean it is not you." The statement hit harder than anything else, because deep down, she was starting to believe him. The hum peaked suddenly, then stilled. Not faded. Stopped. Like a breath held too long. And then, from the center platform, something shifted. A sound. Stone against stone. Emily turned slowly, drawn by something she could not resist. The raised platform where the painting stood began to move. Not the painting itself, but the structure beneath it. Ancient mechanisms, hidden for centuries, grinding back to life. A seam appeared in the stone floor, thin at first, then widening. The entire hall seemed to hold its breath. No, one of the council members whispered, fear breaking through their composure for the first time. That chamber has not opened in centuries. Emily's heart pounded as the stone split further, revealing darkness beneath. Not empty darkness. Depth. Endless. Calling. She took another step without realizing it. Emily, Lucian said, his voice sharper now. Warning. But she could not stop. Something was pulling her forward. Not physically. Something deeper. Recognition. As if whatever lay beneath that hall knew her, and had been waiting for her to return. Emily did not feel her feet move, but the distance between her and the opening in the floor began to close. Each step echoed too loudly in the vast hall, as if the space itself was aware of her approach. The darkness below was not empty. It pulsed. Slow. Steady. Like a heartbeat that did not belong to any living thing. Stop, Lucian said, his voice no longer soft. It carried command now, sharp enough to cut through the pull surrounding her. But even that command struggled against whatever was drawing her forward. Emily's fingers twitched at her sides, her breath shallow, her mind caught between fear and something far more dangerous. Recognition. I cannot, she whispered. The words came out strained, almost confused, as if she were hearing herself from a distance. It feels like she hesitated, searching for something that did not sound insane. Like I'm supposed to be there. The hall reacted instantly. A ripple of unease spread through the vampires, sharper this time, closer to fear than before. One of the council members stepped back entirely. This is wrong, he said. Seal it. Now. But no one moved to obey. Because no one knew how. The mechanism beneath the hall continued to open. Ancient stone grinding slowly, deliberately, revealing a staircase descending into darkness that seemed too deep for the structure above it. The air that rose from below was colder than anything in the hall, not just in temperature, but in presence. Old, unfamiliar, powerful. Lucian moved then, not fast, not rushed, but with undeniable intent. In a single motion, he stepped in front of Emily, cutting off her path before she could take another step. The sudden barrier broke the invisible pull just enough for her to stop. She blinked, disoriented, her body swaying slightly, as if waking from something she could not remember entering. Do not go further, he said, his voice low, controlled, but carrying something else beneath it. Concern. Not for himself. For her. Emily looked up at him, her expression shaken. What is down there? She asked. The question lingered in the air longer than it should have. No one answered immediately. Even the council remained silent. Lucian held her gaze for a moment, then shifted his eyes toward the opening. The faint amber light from the hall did not reach far into the darkness below. It swallowed it. A place that has been sealed for longer than any of them have lived, he said finally. And for good reason. The answer did nothing to calm her. If anything, it made the pull inside her stronger. She could still feel it quieter now, but persistent. Waiting. Then why did it open for me? She asked. Lucian did not respond right away. The silence itself was an answer. Behind him, the woman in crimson forced herself free of whatever invisible force had held her still. Her control had returned, but not her composure. You see it now, she said, her voice tight, edged with urgency. She is not just connected to the past. She is unlocking things that should remain buried. Her gaze locked onto Emily with renewed intensity. This is no coincidence. This is a breach. Several others nodded, the tension rising again, thicker, heavier. If that chamber opens fully, another added, we do not know what will awaken with it. The words hung in the air, dark and uncertain. Emily's stomach tightened. Awaken, she repeated quietly. The idea sent a chill through her that went deeper than fear. Because something inside her responded to that word. Not with dread, with familiarity. Nothing awakens without purpose, Lucian said, his tone cutting through the rising panic. He did not raise his voice, but it did not need to be raised. The authority in it was absolute. The room stilled again, tension held in check by his presence alone. Then he turned back to Emily, his expression unreadable for a brief moment before settling into something deliberate. Decided. "You will not remain here," he said. The words came as a command, not a suggestion. Emily blinked. "What do you mean? This hall is no longer safe for you." A pause. Then, more quietly, or for anyone, the implication settled heavily over the room. He gestured once, and two guards stepped forward, but unlike before, their movements were careful, restrained, respectful. "You will be taken to the East Wing," Lucian continued. "You will be given a room. You will not leave it without my permission." Emily's confusion sharpened into resistance. "You cannot just keep me here," she said, her voice rising despite everything. "I have a life. I have a job." The words sounded small the moment they left her mouth. Fragile, insignificant against everything unfolding around her. But they were real. They were hers. Lucian held her gaze, and for the first time, something softened just slightly. Not enough to be called kindness, but enough to feel human. "That life ended the moment you stepped through that door," he said quietly. The truth in his voice was undeniable, and that was what made it unbearable. Emily's chest tightened as she glanced once more toward the opening in the floor. The darkness remained, waiting, watching, as if it knew she would return. And somewhere deep inside her, she knew it was right. The guards did not touch her at first. They stood a few feet away, waiting, as if unsure whether they were escorting a prisoner or something far more dangerous. Emily remained still, her eyes locked on the opening in the floor for one last second. The darkness below seemed to pulse again, faint but unmistakable, like it had noticed her hesitation, like it was aware she was leaving. A chill ran through her spine, sharp and sudden. Then she turned away. The moment she did, the pull weakened, not gone, but distant, like a voice fading behind a closed door. "Move," one of the guards said quietly. Not harsh, not threatening, just firm. Emily hesitated only a second longer before stepping forward. Her legs felt unsteady, not from fear alone, but from the strange absence of something she had not realized was holding her. The hall seemed different now as she walked. Larger, colder. The eyes of the vampires followed her every step, no longer filled with immediate hostility, but something more complex. Suspicion, curiosity, and beneath it all, unease. No one spoke as she passed. No one dared break the silence that had settled after the king's command. Behind her, she could feel Lucian's presence even without looking. Heavy, constant, watching. The doors at the far end of the hall opened. Before she reached them, the massive stone panels moving without visible effort, revealing a long corridor lit by dim golden lights. The moment she crossed the threshold, the air shifted. It was still cold, but no longer oppressive. The suffocating weight of the forbidden hall lifted just enough for her lungs to expand fully again. She did not realize how much it had affected her until it was gone. The doors closed behind her with a deep, final sound. The connection snapped. Completely. Emily stopped walking. Just for a second. The sudden silence in her mind felt wrong. Empty. She shook it off quickly, forcing herself to keep moving as the guards guided her down the corridor. The walls here were smoother, polished stone instead of ancient carved pillars. Paintings lined the sides, but none of them held the same unsettling presence as the one in the hall. These were portraits of figures she did not recognize, dressed in dark formal attire, their expressions calm, controlled, distant. Power without chaos. Control without fear. It was a different world from the one she had just left behind. "Where are you taking me?" she asked, her voice steadier now, though the tension had not left her completely. "The East Wing," one of the guards replied. "As ordered." "And then what?" The guard did not answer immediately. "Then you wait." The simplicity of that answer unsettled her more than anything else. Wait for what? No one explained. They walked in silence after that, their footsteps echoing softly along the corridor. Emily counted them without meaning to. 1, 2, 3. Anything to keep her thoughts from spiraling back to the hall, to the painting, to the way Lucien had said her name. After what felt like several minutes, they reached a set of doors unlike the others. Taller, darker, carved with patterns that seemed to shift if she looked at them too long. The guard stopped. One of them reached forward and pushed the door open slowly. Warm light spilled out from inside. Emily hesitated again, her instincts pulling in opposite directions. Everything about today had taught her that stepping through unknown doors led to consequences she could not predict. Go, the guard said quietly. She stepped inside. The room was larger than any place she had ever lived in. A bed stood against the far wall, covered in dark fabric that looked soft, enough to sink into. A fireplace glowed with steady warmth, casting flickering light across the space. Shelves lined one side of the room, filled with books and objects she could not identify from a distance. It did not look like a prison. It looked like a place prepared. Intentionally, the door closed behind her before she could turn back. The sound echoed, final but not harsh. She was alone, completely. Emily stood in the center of the room, her arms wrapped around herself without realizing it. The quiet pressed in around her, not threatening, but unfamiliar. Too calm after everything that had just happened. She took a slow breath, then another, trying to steady the chaos inside her. It did not work. Her mind kept circling back. The painting, the chamber, the way the hall had reacted to her. And most of all, the way Lucien had looked at her. Not like a stranger, not like a ruler looking at a subject, but like someone who had lost something and just found it again. Emily crossed the room slowly, drawn toward the nearest surface just to ground herself. Her fingers brushed against the edge of a table, cool and solid beneath her touch. Real, something she could understand. But as her hand rested there, something else caught her attention. A small object, placed carefully at the center of the table. She had not noticed it when she entered. It should not have been there, not unless someone had placed it after she arrived. Emily leaned closer, her breath catching slightly as she recognized what she was looking at. It was a ring. Old, intricate, the metal darkened with age, the design unfamiliar but precise, deliberate. At its center was a symbol she did not understand, yet something about it felt disturbingly familiar. Her fingers hovered above it. She did not remember reaching for it, but she could not seem to stop herself. Emily's fingers hovered above the ring, trembling slightly as if something inside her was warning her not to touch it, while something deeper urged her to do the exact opposite. The room remained silent, but the quiet no longer felt empty. It felt charged, as if the air itself was waiting for her next move. This is a bad idea, she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible. The words sounded reasonable, logical, human, but they did not. Stop her. Slowly, almost against her own will, her fingers lowered until they brushed the surface of the ring. The moment her skin made contact, everything changed. The warmth of the room vanished instantly, replaced by a sharp, biting cold that shot up her arm like lightning. Emily gasped, her body stiffening as her vision blurred. The room around her seemed to fold inward, the walls dissolving into shadows that stretched and twisted. She tried to pull her hand back, but her fingers would not move. It was as if the ring had anchored her in place. Then the sound began. Not loud, not external. A whisper inside her mind, layered with voices she could not separate. Words she did not understand, yet somehow felt familiar. Her breath came faster, panic rising as the darkness around her shifted again. And then, without warning, the shadows broke. Light flooded her vision. Not the warm glow of the room, but something brighter. Alive. She was no longer standing in the East Wing. She stood in the same hall she had just left, but it was different. The air was warmer. The stone was untouched, pristine, not worn by time. The torches burned brighter, casting golden light instead of that dim amber glow. And the silence was gone. The hall was filled with voices. Laughter, movement, life. Emily's heart pounded as she turned slowly, taking in the impossible scene. Figures moved around her, dressed in elegant clothing, their expressions relaxed, unaware of her presence. Vampires. But not the cold, distant beings she had just seen. These looked alive in a different way. Less restrained. Less haunted. You were late, a voice said behind her. The sound hit her like a shock. She turned. He stood there. Lucian. But not the Lucian she had just met. This version of him looked the same, yet entirely different. His posture was less rigid. His eyes, though still intense, held warmth that had no place in the man she had faced moments ago. He was looking directly at her, not through her. At her. I was starting to think you had changed your mind, he continued, a faint smile touching his lips. Emily's throat tightened. She tried to speak, but no words came out, because she knew something was wrong. He was not speaking to her, not the version of her standing there now. Slowly she looked down. Her breath caught. The hands she saw were not quite hers. The skin looked the same, but the posture, the way they moved, felt unfamiliar. Controlled. Graceful. As if they belonged to someone who knew exactly where they stood in this world. I would never, she heard herself say. The voice was hers, yet not hers. Softer. Steadier. Certain in a way she had never been. Panic surged through her. She was not just seeing this. She was inside it, trapped in a moment that had already happened. Lucian stepped closer, his gaze never leaving her face. You say that now, he said quietly. But the world has a way of changing even the strongest promises. There was no fear in this version of her. No hositación, only something deeper, something rooted. Then I will not let it, she replied. The words came without effort, carrying a weight that did not belong to the life Emily remembered. Lucian studied her for a moment, then reached out slowly. His hand lifted toward hers. The same motion, the same distance, the same pull she had felt in the hall. Then give me your word, he said. No matter what happens, no matter what you are told, you will find your way back to me. The air stilled. The world seemed to hold its breath. Emily felt the answer before she heard it. I promise, she said. The moment the word left her lips, the vision shattered. The light collapsed inward, the warmth torn away, replaced once again by the cold darkness of the present. Emily staggered back, her hand finally breaking free from the ring as if released from a grip she could not see. She caught herself against the table, her breath ragged, her heart racing out of control. The room snapped back into focus around her. The fireplace, the walls, the silence. But something was different now, because the echo of that promise remained. And for the first time, Emily was no longer certain that the life she remembered was the only one she had ever lived. Emily's breath refused to steady. The echo of the promise still lingered in her chest, not like a memory, but like something alive, something that had been waiting for her to remember it. Her fingers trembled as she pulled her hand fully away from the ring, stepping back as if distance alone could separate her from what she had just seen. It did not work. The warmth from that other place, that other time, still clung to her senses, fading slowly but refusing to disappear. That was not real, she whispered, more to convince herself than anything else. It cannot be. But even as the words left her mouth, they felt hollow, because it had felt real. Too real. The way the air had moved. The way his voice had sounded. The way she had answered without hesitation. None of it felt imagined. A soft sound broke the silence behind her. The door. Emily turned sharply, her heart jumping as it opened without warning. One of the guards stood there, his posture rigid, but his expression different from before. Less hostile. More cautious. The king will see you, he said. No explanation. No choice. Emily hesitated, her gaze flicking once toward the ring on the table. It remained still, silent, as if nothing had happened. But she knew better now. Now, the guard added. She nodded slowly, forcing herself to move. Each step toward the door felt heavier than the last, as if she were walking deeper into something she could no longer escape. The corridor outside was unchanged, but the atmosphere had shifted. Subtle, but undeniable. The silence felt sharper, tighter, as if something had spread through the castle in the short time she had been inside that room. Word traveled fast in places like this, especially when it carried fear. They walked in silence, the guard leading, Emily following a few feet behind. Her mind raced, replaying the vision again and again, searching for anything that could explain it. But there was nothing, no memory in her life that connected to that place. No explanation for why she had spoken those words like they belonged to her. No reason why Lucien had looked at her like he had already lost her once before. The thought made her chest tighten. The doors ahead opened before they reached them, revealing a larger chamber than any she had seen so far. Not as ancient as the hall, not as personal as the room she had been given. This was something else, a place of power, of decision. The council was already there, every one of them. Their presence filled the space, their attention shifting immediately toward her as she entered. The tension hit her instantly, sharp and unhidden this time. This was no longer uncertainty. This was opposition. The woman in crimson stood at the center, her expression controlled, but her eyes colder than before. "You brought her back," she said, her voice carrying across the room. It was not a question. The guard stepped aside, leaving Emily exposed in the center of the chamber. Alone, Lucien stood at the far end, his posture unchanged, his presence as immovable as before. But there was something different in the way he looked at her now. Not just recognition, awareness, as if he could see something in her that even she did not fully understand yet. "She was never meant to leave," he replied calmly. The statement sent a ripple through the council. "This is no longer about a single human," another voice said, stepping forward from the side. "The chamber has opened. The hall has responded. Whatever she carries is already affecting this place." Emily felt the weight of those words settle around her. Affecting, as if she were a force, not a person. "I did not do anything," she said, her voice rising despite the pressure closing in around her. "I do not even know what is happening to me." The woman in crimson took a slow step forward. "That is precisely the problem," she said. "You are a variable we cannot predict." The room tightened again, the unspoken tension rising toward something more dangerous. "Then remove the variable," another council member said, "before it escalates." The meaning was clear. It did not need to be explained. Emily's pulse spiked, fear cutting through the confusion like a blade. Her gaze snapped to Lucien, searching for something, anything that would stop what was coming. He did not hesitate. "No," he said. One word, the same as before. But this time it carried something more. Finality. The room reacted instantly. Voices rose, overlapping, controlled but no longer calm. "You would risk everything for her," the woman in crimson pressed. "For something you do not even understand." Lucien's gaze did not waver. "I understand more than you think." Silence followed. Heavy. Waiting. Then he spoke again. Slower this time, each word deliberate. "If you harm her," he said, his voice dropping just enough to make every vampire in the room lean in without realizing it, "you will not be protecting this world." A pause. Then quietly, "You will be destroying the only chance it has left." The words landed harder than anything else that had been said. Not just a warning, a truth. And for the first time, even the council did not immediately respond. Because deep down they could feel it too. Whatever Emily Carter had become, it was no longer something that could simply be erased. The silence that followed his words did not feel like peace. It felt like the moment before something broke. Emily stood in the center of the chamber, every instinct telling her she should not be here, that she did not belong in a place where ancient beings debated her existence like a problem to be solved. And yet, she could not deny it anymore. She was no longer invisible. She was the center of something far bigger than herself. The woman in crimson exhaled slowly, her composure returning piece by piece, though the tension in her eyes remained. "You speak of chances," she said, her voice measured now, controlled, but carrying a sharper edge beneath it. "But you offer no explanation, no proof, only instinct." Her gaze shifted briefly toward Emily, then back to Lucien. "That is not enough to risk everything we have built." A murmur of agreement moved through the council. Not loud, not unified, but present, enough to matter. Lucien did not respond immediately. He let the silence stretch, let the weight of their doubt settle fully before he spoke again. "You want proof," he said quietly. "Then look at her." The simplicity of the statement seemed to unsettle them more than any argument. Slowly, reluctantly, several members of the council turned their attention back to Emily. Not as a threat this time, not entirely, but as something they could no longer ignore. Emily felt it instantly, the shift in how they saw her. It made her skin prickle. "I do not know what you think you are seeing," she said, her voice steadying despite the pressure. "But I'm still the same person I was this morning." The words sounded weaker than she intended, because deep down, she knew that was no longer entirely true. The room felt it too. The woman in crimson stepped closer, her movements precise, deliberate, stopping just a few feet away from Emily. Close enough to study her. Close enough to feel the difference. "No," she said softly. "You are not." The statement landed with quiet certainty. Emily's breath caught. "The hall responded to you," the woman continued. "The chamber opened for you. And whatever lies beneath that stone," her voice lowered slightly, "it recognized you." The last word echoed heavier than the rest. Recognized. Not triggered. Not activated. Recognized. Emily's chest tightened again, that same strange pull stirring beneath her ribs. "That does not make me a threat," she said, though the conviction in her voice faltered slightly. The woman's expression did not change. "It makes you unknown." She straightened, turning slightly toward the rest of the council. "And in our world, the unknown is always the most dangerous thing." Several heads nodded in agreement. The tension returned, sharper now, more focused. "Then contain it," one of the elders said. "If we cannot destroy it, we control it." The word hit Emily harder than anything else. Control. Her eyes snapped toward Lucian again, a flicker of fear breaking through her composure. "I'm not something you can lock away," she said, her voice rising. "I'm a person." The chamber reacted instantly, not with anger, but with something colder. Indifference. The distinction between person and problem did not hold the same meaning here. Lucian stepped forward then, closing the distance between them with quiet authority. The movement alone was enough to silence the rising tension again. "She will not be contained," he said. His tone left no room for interpretation. The woman in crimson turned back to him, her patience thinning. "Then what is your solution?" she demanded. "You refuse to eliminate the threat. You refuse to restrict it. What exactly do you intend to do?" A pause. Not long, but deliberate. Lucian's gaze shifted to Emily, holding there for a moment that felt longer than it should. Something passed between them. Not spoken, not understood, but real. Then he turned back to the council. "We find the truth," he said. The answer seemed almost too simple, but carried weight. "Before others do." That was what changed the room. Not the idea of truth, the implication behind it. Others. The word spread through the chamber like a shadow. "You believe they already know," one of the council members said slowly. Lucian did not deny it. The moment the chamber opened, he said, the signal was sent. The realization hit them all at once. The unease from before, sharpened into something far more dangerous. Urgency. "Then we do not have time," the woman in crimson said. "If the clans learn of this," she did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. They all understood. Emily felt it too, even without knowing the details. Whatever world she had stepped into, it was not contained within these walls. And whatever she had awakened, it had already begun to spread. Lucian's voice cut through the rising tension one final time. "Which is why she stays with me." The room went still again. Completely. Because this time, the statement was not just protection. It was a claim. And in a world built on power, that meant everything. The chamber did not erupt. It did not need to. The moment Lucian spoke those words, the entire room shifted in a way that was far more dangerous than noise. Stillness returned, but this time it was sharp, edged with tension that could break at any second. Emily felt it immediately. The weight of his claim settled over her like something tangible, something that changed the way every single being in that room now looked at her. She was no longer just a question. She had become a position, a side, and in this world, that meant conflict. The woman in crimson was the first to move, her composure returning with practiced precision, though her eyes burned colder than before. "You cannot be serious," she said quietly. Her voice did not rise, but it carried further than a shout. To place her under your direct protection is not a decision. It is a declaration. Lucien did not look at her. His gaze remained on Emily, steady, unyielding. "Then let it be one," he replied. The simplicity of his answer made the tension snap tighter. "You would bind your authority to something you do not fully understand," another council member said, stepping forward, his tone more controlled but no less firm. "If she becomes a threat, it will not be contained to her. It will reflect on you." Lucien's expression did not change. "Then I will bear that consequence." The certainty in his voice left no room for argument. And that was what made it worse. Because it meant he had already decided. Emily's breath caught. The words settled deeper than anything else that had been said. Not because of what they meant for the council, but because of what they meant for her. She had not asked for this. She had not chosen this. And yet, somehow, she had just been placed at the center of a power she could not control. "You cannot just decide this for me," she said, the words breaking through before she could stop them. Every eye in the chamber snapped toward her. The silence that followed was immediate and absolute. Even the council paused, because no one interrupted him. No one challenged him. And yet she had. Lucien turned his head slowly, his gaze settling on her again. Not cold, not angry, focused. "This is no longer a matter of choice," he said quietly. The words were not meant to silence her. They were meant to make her understand. It never was. Emily shook her head, her pulse rising again. "That does not make it right." For a moment, something shifted in his expression. Something almost human. Almost. Then it was gone. "Right has nothing to do with what is coming," he said. The answer sent a chill through her that had nothing to do with the room. Behind them, the tension within the council reached its breaking point. The woman in crimson stepped forward again, this time with no attempt to hide her opposition. "Then we cannot support this," she said firmly. "If you choose to bind yourself to her, you do so alone." A ripple of agreement followed. Not unanimous, but enough. Lines were being drawn. Lucien acknowledged it with a single glance. Nothing more. "Then stand where you must," he said. The dismissal was quiet, final. The council fell silent again, but the shift remained. This was no longer a unified chamber. It had fractured. Emily felt it in the air, sharp and undeniable. Whatever happened next would not be contained to a single room. Lucien stepped closer to her, closing the distance completely this time. The movement blocked out everything else, narrowing her world to just him. "You will come with me," he said. Not a question, not a command shouted across a room. A decision already made. Emily hesitated, her instincts pulling her in opposite directions again. Fear told her to run. Logic told her she could not. And something deeper, something she did not fully understand yet, told her stay. "And if I refuse?" she asked quietly. The question hung. Between them, fragile but real. Lucien held her gaze for a long moment. Then, softer than before, he answered, "You will not." The certainty in his voice was not control. It was knowledge. And that was what unsettled her most. Because part of her believed him. Without another word, he turned and began walking toward the far exit of the chamber. No hesitation, no doubt that she would follow. Emily stood there for a second longer, her heart racing, her thoughts colliding, her entire life unraveling in ways she could not grasp. Then she moved. One step, then another. Behind her, the council watched in silence, their expressions unreadable, their allegiance no longer certain. And as the doors closed behind her once again, Emily Carter realized something she could not ignore anymore. This was no longer about survival. This was about something far older, something that had already chosen her long before she ever stepped into that hall. And now, there was no turning back. The corridor beyond the council chamber stretched long and silent, its polished stone floors reflecting the dim golden light above like still water. Emily followed a few steps behind Lucien, her footsteps quieter now, not because she felt calm, but because something inside her had shifted. The fear was still there, sharp and real, but it was no longer the only thing guiding her. There was something else beneath it, something steady, something that felt like it had been waiting for her to reach this point. Lucien did not look back to check if she was following. He did not need to. His pace remained measured, deliberate, each step carrying the same controlled authority she had seen from the moment he entered the hall. But now, away from the council, away from the eyes of others, there was a subtle change in the atmosphere around him. The pressure was still there, but it was quieter, more contained, as if he no longer needed to hold the entire world in place. They passed through a series of corridors, each one more private than the last. The architecture shifted gradually from grand and imposing to something more restrained, more personal. Fewer guards, fewer eyes, fewer reminders that she was in the center of something dangerous. Finally, they stopped in front of a pair of dark wooden doors carved with intricate patterns that seemed older than anything she had seen so far. Lucien paused, his hand resting briefly against the surface, not pushing it open immediately. For a moment, he did not move. The stillness felt different this time. Not calculated, not strategic, something else. Then he opened the door. The room beyond was vast, but not in the same way as the hall. It was not designed to intimidate. It was designed to endure. Tall windows lined one wall, though no light passed through them, only darkness stretching beyond the glass. Shelves filled with ancient books covered the opposite side, their spines worn with age. A long table stood at the center, covered in maps, documents, and objects that looked like they had not been moved in years. This was not just a room. It was a place of memory, of history, of decisions that shaped everything outside its walls. Lucien stepped inside, and for the first time since she had met him, he exhaled. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but Emily noticed it. He was not relaxing. Not entirely, but he was no longer holding himself as tightly as before. "Close the door," he said. Emily hesitated only for a second before doing as he asked. The heavy would shut with a low sound, sealing them inside. The moment it did, the silence changed. It was no longer the silence of a place filled with others. It was something more private, more dangerous in a different way. Emily turned back toward him, her arms crossing instinctively as she tried to ground herself again. "You said you would explain," she said. Her voice was steady, but there was no hiding the tension beneath it. Lucien did not respond immediately. He moved slowly across the room, his gaze passing over the table, the shelves, the windows, as if he were confirming something only he could see. Then he stopped, his back partially turned to her. "There are things in this world," he said quietly, "that do not belong to time." The words settled into the room, heavy and deliberate. Emily frowned slightly, confusion rising again. "That does not explain anything." Lucien turned then, his eyes locking onto hers. "You are one of them." The statement hit harder than anything else he had said, not because of the words themselves, but because of the certainty behind them. Emily shook her head immediately. "No," she said, the denial instinctive. "That is not possible." "You have already seen it," he replied. "You felt it in the hall. You saw it when you touched the ring." Her breath caught. The memory of the vision surged back, sharp and undeniable. "That was not real," she insisted, though her voice wavered. "It was not a dream," Lucien said. "It was a memory." The room seemed to tilt slightly as the words settled between them. Memory, not imagination, not illusion, something that had already happened. "That is impossible," Emily whispered. "I have never been here before." Lucien stepped closer, the distance between them shrinking again, though this time it felt different. Not overwhelming, not threatening, focused, intent. "Not in this life," he said. The words landed softly, but they carried more weight than anything else. Emily's mind struggled to process it, rejecting it even as something deep inside her responded to it. That same pull, that same recognition she could not explain. "You were saying I was—" She could not finish the sentence. The idea itself felt too large, too unreal. Lucien watched her carefully, his expression controlled, but there was something beneath it now. Something quieter, something that had nothing to do with power. "You made a promise," he said. Emily froze. The words cut through everything else, straight to the core of what she had seen, what she had felt. Her breath caught again, sharper this time. How do you know that? She asked. Lucian did not hesitate. Because I was there when you made it. The room fell completely silent. And for the first time since this began, Emily felt something shift inside her that was stronger than fear. Because if what he was saying was true, then this was not the beginning of her story. It was the continuation of something she had already lived once before. Emily could not move. The weight of his words held her in place more effectively than any force ever could. Because deep down, beneath the confusion, beneath the fear, beneath everything she thought she knew about herself, something inside her had already begun to respond. Not fully, not clearly, but enough to make denial feel fragile. That is not possible, she said again, though this time the words came softer, less certain. Her eyes searched his face, looking for doubt, for hesitation, for anything that might suggest he was wrong. She found none. Lucian did not look away. He did not soften the truth. You died, he said quietly. The words landed with a finality that stole the air from her lungs. Emily's breath hitched, her body reacting before her mind could catch up. No, she whispered, shaking her head instinctively. No, I am right here. Yes, he said. Now you are. The distinction settled heavily between them. Then and now, before and after. Emily took a step back, her hand instinctively reaching for the edge of the table to steady herself. Her thoughts raced, tried to reject what she was hearing, trying to anchor herself to something real, something she understood. If I died, she said, her voice trembling despite her effort to hold it steady, then how am I here? Lucian watched her carefully, as if weighing how much she could take. Then he answered, because something refused to let you go. The room seemed to tighten around her again, not physically, but emotionally, as if the truth itself carried pressure. What does that mean? She asked. Lucian's gaze shifted briefly, not away from her, but inward, as if recalling something he had not spoken aloud in a very long time. There are forces older than this world, he said slowly. Older than my kind. Older than the laws that govern us. When they choose to act, they do not ask permission. Emily felt that same strange pull again, stronger now, sharper, like something inside her was being called forward. And you think that is what happened to me, she said. I do not think, Lucian replied. I know. The certainty in his voice left no space for argument, but it also left no space for comfort. Emily's chest tightened as she looked down at her hands again, the memory of the vision replaying in her mind with increasing clarity. The way she had spoken, the way she had felt, the promise. What happened to me before? She asked quietly. Lucian did not answer immediately. When he did, his voice carried something different. Not power, not command, something quieter, something heavier. You were not meant to die, he said. The statement sounded simple. It was not. Then why did I? Emily asked. Lucian's jaw tightened slightly, the first visible crack in his composure since they had entered the room. Because I failed. The words hung in the air, unexpected, unguarded. Emily looked up sharply, caught off guard by the shift. This was not the same voice he had used in the hall. This was not the same presence that had silenced an entire council with a single word. This was something else, something closer to regret. You do not seem like someone who fails, she said quietly. Lucian's gaze darkened, not with anger, but with memory. Everyone fails, he said. The difference is what it costs. The room fell silent again, but this silence felt different. Not tense, not controlled, heavy. Emily felt it settle into her chest, pressing against something she could not fully access yet. What did it cost you? She asked. The question slipped out before she could stop it. Lucian did not answer right away. His eyes held hers, and for a moment, something passed between them that had nothing to do with the present. Something older, something shared. You, he said finally. The word was quiet, but it carried more weight than anything else. Emily's breath caught. The simplicity of the answer made it hit harder. Not a war, not a kingdom, not power. Her. The realization settled slowly, but when it did, it changed everything. Because it meant this was not just about fate. It was not just about some ancient force bringing her back. It was personal, deeply personal. That is why you will not let them harm me, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. It was not a question. Lucien did not deny it. That is one reason, he said. The answer surprised her. One reason, she repeated. What is the other? Lucien stepped closer, the space between them narrowing again, but this time it did not feel overwhelming. It felt inevitable. Because if what has returned with you is what I believe it is, he said slowly, then your life is no longer just your own. The words settled into her like a quiet warning. Emily felt her pulse quicken again, but not from fear alone. Something else had begun to grow beneath it. Understanding. Not complete. Not yet. But enough to realize that whatever she had become, whatever had brought her back, it was tied to something far greater than either of them alone. And for the first time since this began, the question forming in her mind was not how she escaped this world. It was what she was, meant to do inside it. Emily stood in the center of the room, her thoughts no longer racing, no longer scattered, but aligning into something she could finally begin to face. The fear had not disappeared. It was still there, steady and real, but it no longer controlled her, because now she understood something she had not allowed herself to see before. This was not happening to her. This was something she had stepped back into. Slowly, she lifted her gaze to meet Lucien's. The weight of everything he had told her settled into a single realization. Then tell me the truth, she said quietly. Not what I was, not what I lost. Tell me what I am now. Lucien studied her for a long moment, as if measuring not her strength, but her willingness to accept what came next. Then he nodded once. You are the key, he said. The words did not sound dramatic. They sounded inevitable. To what? Emily asked. Lucien turned slightly, his gaze shifting toward the far wall, as if he could see beyond it, past stone and distance, back to the place beneath the forbidden hall. To what was sealed, he said, and to what must never be released again. Emily felt the pull inside her respond immediately, stronger than before, no longer distant, no longer hidden. It was clear now, defined, waiting. And if I refuse, she asked. Lucien looked back at her. Then it will not matter, he said, because it has already begun. The truth in his voice settled deeper than fear ever could. Emily closed her eyes for a brief moment, letting the weight of everything wash over her. The life she had known, the person she thought she was, the normal world that now felt impossibly far away. It was gone, not taken from her, outgrown. When she opened her eyes again, something had changed. Not in the room, not in Lucien, in her. The hesitation was gone. The confusion had not vanished, but it no longer paralyzed her. Then I do not run from it, she said. Her voice was steady now, certain. Lucien did not smile, but something in his expression shifted just enough to reveal approval, or perhaps recognition. No, he said, you do not. Emily took a slow breath, then another, grounding herself in the choice she had just made. Then you're going to. Take me back there, she continued. To the chamber. Lucien held her gaze. Yes. The answer came without hesitation. But this time, he added, you will not be led by instinct. A pause. Then, quietly, you will be guided by truth. The words settled into her, heavy but steadying. For the first time since this began, she felt something close to control. Not over what was happening, but over how she would face it. Lucien stepped past her, moving toward the door. He paused only briefly, as if giving her the space to decide if she would follow. Emily did not hesitate this time. She moved forward, falling in a step beside him. Not behind, not dragged forward. Beside. The doors opened as they approached, the corridor beyond stretching out once again, but it no longer felt like a path she had been forced onto. It felt like something she had chosen. As they walked, the castle seemed to shift around them, subtle but undeniable, as if it too recognized what was about to happen. The air grew colder with each step, the pull inside her strengthening, no longer overwhelming, but aligning with her movement instead of fighting it. When they reached the entrance to the forbidden hall, the doors stood closed, silent and imposing. But this time, Emily did not hesitate. She stepped forward, placing her hand against the cold stone. For a brief second, nothing happened. Then the doors opened. slowly, smoothly, as if they had never been sealed at all. The hall beyond was darker now, quieter, waiting, but the fear that had once filled her chest did not return. Because she understood now. This place did not reject her. It recognized her. Lucian stood beside her, his presence steady, unyielding. "This is where it ends," he said. Emily shook her head slightly, her gaze fixed on the center of the hall, where the chamber had opened before. "No," she replied softly. "This is where it begins." Together, they stepped inside. The hall responded instantly, the air shifting, the light bending, the ancient space waking once more. But this time, it did not feel like something breaking. It felt like something being restored. And as Emily Carter walked forward, no longer lost, no longer unaware, the truth finally settled into place. She had not been brought back to survive. She had been brought back to finish what she had started. And this time, she would not fail.